Hey everyone, welcome to the Anexipod, the official podcast for Anexinet. This is episode 3 for May 24th, 2016. I'm your host, Ned Bellavance, Enterprise Architect for Infrastructure Solutions at Anexinet, and the silver medalist in the Dominic Purcell Lookalike Contest. Here on the Anexipod, we talk technology for the enterprise, covering infrastructure, app dev, analytics, and anything else that is shiny. On this episode, we will be talking about UNITY from EMC World, Unikernel's Chase the Unicorn, and the future of infrastructure with our guest, Scott Richards of HPE. April showers bring May flowers, and May flowers bring pilgrims. At least, that's what my son tells me. It is the start of convention season, though, and we'll be making the pilgrimage to our favorite conference. Things have already kicked off with EMC World, Dell Technologies World, and Interopt 2016. DockerCon is coming up in mid-June. In July, there is MS World Partner Conference and Cisco Live. VMware, VMworld, and Gartner fill up August, and MS Ignite and Oracle OpenWorld polish off the year in September. I'd love to go to some or all of these, but alas, funding is limited, and so is my time. I'll make it to MS Ignite this year, and hopefully that will coincide with the formal release of Server 2016. What conferences are your favorites? Hit me up at Ned1313 on Twitter and let me know. Speaking of Server 2016, let's get into the AnexiBytes. Windows Server Technical Preview 5 is out. Microsoft has released the 5th iteration of Server 2016 for your consideration. The newest release doesn't include a lot of new features, rather it continues to refine the offerings that have already been released. NanoServer has gained some additional management capabilities. Hyper-V has extended its security capabilities to lock down both the hypervisor and the guest operating systems. Windows Containers has also made some serious strides in usability and compatibility with Docker. The biggest surprise to me? Technical Preview 5. I really thought that the next iteration would be a release candidate and not another technical preview. Makes me wonder if the general availability is meant to coincide with Microsoft Ignite in September. Hopefully, this thing will actually ship in 2016 and not just be a misnomer. EMC World announcements. The big highlights for EMC World included the official resignation of Joe Tucci, the renaming of EMC to Dell Technologies, and the celebration of the newest line of hardware. They are calling it the Unity platform, but you can mostly think of it as VNX 3 for the most part. Look for a more in-depth deep dive on the next podcast. AWS announces new services and breaks $2 billion in a quarter. The AWS Summit announced new services like Amazon Inspector, which is an API to check the security profile of an application on-premise before it's deployed to AWS. They also announced S3 Transfer Accelerator, which makes use of Amazon's content delivery network and edge networks to help transfer data from your on-premise location to Amazon Web Services as quickly as possible. Storage options have also proliferated on AWS to include some new options for EC2, throughput optimized HDD, and cold HDD, aka infrequent access. So not quite as slow as Glacier, but still pretty slow. Both options are meant to allow for occasional bursts of access, followed by large periods of inactivity. With over $2 billion in net income in the last quarter, AWS is still the 800-pound gorilla of cloud compute. Salesforce NA14 goes down, data lost. Nothing hurts a SaaS's credibility like downtime. But downtime with data loss could be a serious injury. Salesforce.com experienced over 12 hours of downtime for their NA14 instance. The initial outage was followed by a successful instance migration, which then flopped 8 hours later. The larger issue is the potential data loss that followed the second failure, which Salesforce has announced that 216 minutes of data will be completely unavailable and unrecoverable. CEO Mark Benioff has offered his abject apologies on Twitter, but user confidence may be shaken and alternatives may be in the works. If you are inclined to start a third-party backup solution for Salesforce.com, now might be the right time to do it. And our last AnexiByte is Google picks Chromium OS to run Google Compute Cloud container-styled VMs. Google has been eating its own dog food for quite some time when it comes to container VMs. They have been running their development and production containers on the open source OS Chromium. That makes a lot of sense since they control the entire stack. That offering is now available in the Google Compute Cloud for consumers to use as opposed to the old Debian-based containers. I suppose if it's good enough for the Google, it's good enough for the gander. That does it for the AnexiBytes. Next up, I'll be talking about unikernels. Computing has changed a lot in the last 15 years, and one of the biggest shifts was thanks in large part to virtualization. The first generation of virtualization took the entire operating system and placed it on virtualized hardware. For the most part, the operating system was not even aware of the virtualization. It just assumed that the hardware presented to it was physical. What were the benefits? There's a lot of them, but the relevant benefits to this discussion are increased density, faster provisioning and startup, and the use of automation and templates. The next major shift was a focusing on services and applications as opposed to servers and operating systems. After all, it is the application that end users are most concerned about, not what server or operating system it is running on. By focusing on delivering an application, particularly based on the 12-factor model, the goal is now to virtualize the application or service, not necessarily the operating system. And that's where containers and Docker entered, who took the tech industry by storm. Rather than having to worry about physical hardware emulation and operating system quirks, containers assume that the underlying OS has the proper kernel and bring their own binaries and libraries to the game. Whereas a virtual machine required a hypervisor and hardware abstraction, containers require a container host, physical or virtual, to provide them with basic operating system functions. The containers themselves are not portable, but they are meant to be stateless and extremely fast to provision. Startup times go from a minute to a couple seconds, and the container is based off an image that is source controlled and stored in a repository. So what is the next level? Back in January, Docker purchased Unikernel systems. What is a unikernel? It's a specialized operating system and application package that is specifically tailored to only include those components that are absolutely essential for the application to run. This gives you many of the benefits of both containers and virtual machines. Since the unikernel is stripped down to bare essentials, the startup times and image size are comparable to containers. So unikernels can be source controlled and stored in repositories as well. Like a virtual machine, unikernels bring the whole stack with them, so they are more isolated and secure than containers and create less networking and shared resource headaches. The key now is for vendors like Docker to develop the tools to create, deploy, and host unikernels. You can read more about unikernels and see a demonstration of one in action on Docker's website. With DockerCon steadily approaching, I have a sneaking suspicion we'll see some new unikernel product demos and announcements at the conference. Welcome everybody. Today I'm joined by Scott Richards, the server dude at Hewlett-Packard. And now it's not just Hewlett-Packard anymore, it's HPE, right?
It's Hewlett-Packard Enterprise now. We're two separate entities.
Excellent. And how are you today, Scott?
I'm fine. I'm actually looking quite, after I saw the amount of technological equipment that you brought in, I'm actually better now.
You're better? Okay.
You're better.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all still a little new to me too, but we'll get through this together, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what's your role at HP and what are the things you get to do, work with, play with?
Well, I've been with HP now for 22 years, and I've done many, many different jobs within HP, and formerly a compact person, one of the first compact people in the Philadelphia area. My role now is working with channel partners around enabling them with our server solutions in all different categories, as well as converged and integrated systems and hybrid cloud solutions. But very focused on channel partners like my premier. This is my shameless plug for Anexinet, my premier partner.
I appreciate that. Okay. So one of the things that I've noticed is we're entering the era of software-defined, everything. The software-defined networks, software-defined storage, you name it, it's software-defined, right? So how have you seen the industry embracing this trend?
I think it's just a key initiative to drive what I would consider, where we're going in life. We have so much data that we track anymore that the performance of the systems can't keep up. Essentially, if your driving goal is to take the data that you have and understand what it is and actually make it into usable data, the more software definition between not only the hardware, but the applications and the APIs that drive both the hardware and the applications is going to make things much quicker today and much more higher performance and much more usable data. If you talk to most customers today, they say that 80% of the data they capture, they have no idea what it is and still not usable. So software defined is just the way of the future to get to that data and drive usable results.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to bust out your crystal ball.
Okay.
And where do you see infrastructure in general? Because I'm an infrastructure guy. That's mostly what I do. Where do you see infrastructure going over the next 3 years? What are the big trends?
Well, I think you guys certainly know as well as I do. The word change is ever constant in our world, and it's the only thing that's constant in our world. So the reality for me is, infrastructure will change. It'll be hybrid in some ways. It'll be off-prem. It'll be on-prem. You'll have to obviously manage what regulatory commitments you have in each vertical industry that you have. But the reality is you'll see hardware much more tightly interconnected, going back to your original statement of software defined, and driving the capabilities to be elastic, bursting, and have the capabilities of giving you the management tools that you need in a much more reliable and sort of single window, pane of glass window to drive that infrastructure.
Yeah, the infamous single pane of glass.
Yes.
I've heard about that so many times, but I've never actually seen it.
Yeah, well, for you guys that are the true technological, hands-on guys that do the day-to-day infrastructure stuff, we try to sell you on that every single year, but the reality is, that's a goal of ours. Firmware updates, maintenance windows. We want to get to a point where maintenance windows, there are no more maintenance windows, where we can shut down one side of the system, upgrade the firmware, turn the other system down, bring the other one back up, and actually have everything running where it is fairly transparent to you that the firmware and maintenance windows sort of go away. Now, is that a nirvana at this point in time? I'd say still yes, but it's a driving goal from the engineering side to get to that sort of non-stop resiliency that everybody needs today.
I think we're definitely getting closer. I've noticed that a lot fewer things require downtime, and especially with virtualization, you can shift workloads dynamically. So if there is something you need to do on the hardware, you can evacuate all the running processes on that and do what you need to do and move it back.
Absolutely.
So thank goodness for virtualization, right?
Yep. What happens when bare metal becomes lower cost in virtualization than the software, and you build virtualization right into the hardware? So, some products today like Moonshot actually have the capability of providing a VDI solution in bare metal with really no virtualization software leaning on top of it, all run by hardware alone.
Right, that's an interesting solution that I saw. They're called cassettes, right? The
cartridges.
Cartridges.
Yeah. Cassettes were back in my day, I think, right around 1970.
Okay, but it looks kind of like an 8-track.
It absolutely does. That's a perfect analysis there of what I look at them as. But they're hot pluggable, very, very workload centric. It could be for telecom, it could be for service providers and static and dynamic content, and in some VDI solutions that we have as an app server or for a VDI type of server. But the cool thing about Moonshot, it's a very low processor power processors such as ARMs or Atoms. In that space, there's about 35 different processor companies that make those products, and they run around somewhere in the range of about 6% to 10% of power utilization that an x86 server does today. But again, very workload specific, and all of HPE actually runs off of Moonshot today.
Really?
Absolutely.
No, I did not know that. That's pretty neat.
Yep.
So you're eating your own dog food, as it were.
Absolutely.
Okay. In that vein of what HP is using these days, I've heard rumors, I've read little things. Every once in a while something leaks out about the machine. I even saw a diagram of it. Is there anything you can tell me about the machine? Anything new that's come out in the last 6 months about it?
Well, the machine, I think I probably have the same image as you do. We've been talking about it for quite a long time. So I think we're going to actually stand a fully functional machine in beta use finally this year.
Wow.
Before that, you'll have, I think, other questions that will lead into the machine. But, we've gone through 2006 from HP Blades to today, which we still have more lifespan in that. And now we've just introduced the next technology, which is composable infrastructure, which is Project Synergy, and that'll be shipping very shortly. And that's the next step in sort of soft-defined compute, storage, and networking, all very tightly integrated. But the beautiful thing about Synergy and composable, it has tie-ins to future upgrades into the machine. So we're looking at some point in time having the machine up and running as being productized by 2021, I think. My belief is this year at Discover, which we run every year for customers and channel partners alike, we'll actually have some working versions of the machines at Discover. So, the essential characteristics of the machine, basically to put it in a small paragraph, is, sort of converging memory and storage. We know that, every tire is being monitored, how many times in rotation, every Fitbit, how many steps you take, your shopping habits, which we already know. People are, it's 3.5 terabytes for a 3-hour flight of storage. For every flight is recorded of every detail, engines, cabin temperature, pressures, you name it, weather characteristics of that flight. And we know that the amount of data that we're processing is overwhelming today, and Moore's law is starting to shrink, or almost come to a halt. So at some point in time, we're going to have to rethink on how we process information. So the whole goal of the machine, and the funny thing is, being a product again of the 60s and the 70s, I think Pink Floyd every time they say the machine. But really, I believe where we're going is an all-memory type of solution that will have the characteristics of non-volatile memory, and be able to have these very fluid and shared resource pools of processor, or let me say compute, and memory that can be reallocated very quickly on the fly to afford specific characteristics of the type of data that we're trying to mine and actually create into what, again, I always say is usable data for that vertical market that we're, whoever's working on that system at that time. So, it's going to be very local memory. It'll provide low latency and high performance, and then very heterogeneous compute resources distributed closer to the data. So, making things smarter, running everything in memory, everything going on the fastest bus humanly possible, and adding things in like non-volatile RAM, as well as photonics. And photonics, takes Ethernet to the next step. Instead of 100 gig, you'll start to think about terabyte speeds for photonics. And by the way, in Synergy and composable, you'll have the component connectors already built in for photonic connectors in that next step.
Okay, yeah, sort of marching it from where fiber terminates now in the back of the server.
Absolutely.
It's, can we get that light deeper and deeper into the infrastructure, because light's always going to be faster than copper, right?
Absolutely. And we have a couple senior fellows in the company. There's a gentleman by the name of Brad Mays, and he's the guy that looks out at compute 20 to 30 years, and strategizes in workshops, and he's the guy that's I always ask him, why do I need a gig network throughput speeds? And he goes, it's because the data is just, we have no way of processing what we need to today, and 20 years from now the data will be incrementally much more. How do we do that unless we fix the current processing and compute problems that we have, trying to make, again, that data into usable functionality?
Right. It seems like right now the biggest constraint is storage, right?
Yep. Storage as well, again, so great comment there in the sense that, we've just surpassed with the 3-par storage product. We actually now, I think as of last week, now sell more all-flash arrays than we actually sell rotational. So.
Yeah. Not to say the big bad word EMC, but at their most recent EMC World, their big thing was this is the year of all flash.
Absolutely.
All of their arrays are now have like an all flash option. Even their like VNXE, I think, has an all flash option. And I know that the 3-par also has its all flash options, and other storage vendors have all been doing the all flash thing too. The cost of flash keeps coming down.
Absolutely. And
the need for that access of speed keeps going up. I know I've seen the other connection technologies, so instead of fiber channel, now going to like InfiniBand with was it NVRE or something?
Non-volatile, yeah.
And connections, remote direct memory connections between servers and all that kind of thing. So I think that all feeds back into the machine, right?
I know it comes into the next step. It's I think Flash and Flash is just not Flash to everybody, right? So, having Flash is one thing, but it's how you use your algorithms, how you compress, how you use the performance, and how you're building it. And as always, Intel has a piece of that pie. They would like an ASIC in an EMC product as well as an HP product. They don't like the fact that the 3-par solution is strictly an HPE solution that way, but it's what differentiates us. It's the algorithms and how we build that storage to be performance optimized, and why we lead. We were the only storage company last year that actually grew. The other 9 that I can think of as the majority players in that space lost market share. And I think it's because of the engineers and the technology that's actually built into the 3-par product today.
Yeah, so there's definitely still a place for custom silicon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I guess the machine might not even be silicon. Who knows? It's a mystery.
Yeah, and you'll still see it. Again, I think next year you'll see a working version sometime this year in HP Labs. At Discover, they always have an HP Labs area, and hopefully next year in some of our briefing centers we'll have an up-and-running version of the machine in Palo Alto and Houston, as well as New York City.
Okay. So you mentioned composable architecture, and I've definitely heard that term thrown out, but I don't really quite understand what it refers to. Can you sort of break it down for me?
My belief is that composable is just the next generation of hyperconverged, right? So hyperconverged is very tightly integrated storage, networking, compute, does a lot of very cool things, but if you look at really where it sits in the marketplace, it really is sort of a small, medium business. You have to do a lot of stacking. They're auto-intelligent. They have auto-cluster, and they become much smarter. They do a lot of orchestration. They do a lot of automation. Well, this is the next step. I think in our world, people define new technology words, so it just drives marketplace. So I'll give you the word from Gartner, and the word of the week is bimodal. So bimodal is really part of what we call the idea economy, and being able to still run your transactional stuff that's been used every day, which is your payroll, your manufacturing, your ERP systems. Not a lot changes there, maybe some upgrades, but now we're at a point where, if you just go to iTunes or Google Play, there's 3,000 new commercial applications a week for mobile products today, and they're collecting data. So now, the CIO used to be a necessary evil, and IT used to be a necessary evil to drive every company. But that was to drive word processing, the applications that they needed for these things. Now IT is now absolutely an edge a part of why I'm going to be better than my competitor in this space, and IT has to be part of the business process. Because if I have technology that serves me well versus my competitor, I hopefully will be in the lead in that space. So bimodal, you're going to see DevOps groups grow from 1 or 2 guys to maybe a group of 10 or 20. They're going to take more risk, but they're going to roll out apps in seconds, not days, not weeks. I always read in a Fortune 500 company, the average time it takes for an application to roll out to be in production is somewhere truly in the world of 60 to 90 days. But now companies can't do that anymore. They need to be able to be competitive, whether it's in retail, whether it's in automotive, energy, healthcare. How do I get my doctors and nurses the tools that they need quickly? And that's going to happen where you have one segment of your IT to be very, very agile, efficient, developmental, and being able to do it in the same system. So composable is really part of our Synergy project, which we'll be shipping this year.
Okay, very cool. So it's, again, going back to the software defined. So you're defining infrastructure via software.
Absolutely. And there's 3 major parts of composable that tie exactly into what you said, Ned, which is a single API. So, what everybody wants is that nirvana. I can write code that'll touch every piece of my infrastructure by a single API. Mm-hmm. So, hopefully we get to that point. It's working now. When we start shipping that product, cover all the different parts of the infrastructure in Synergy. Same way as the machine, very, very fluid pools of resources, which will be compute, I/O, and storage and networking, or I/O included in that, very tightly software defined. So we're going to use a RESTful API to be able to drive web scale type of performance, and also have the capabilities of being very, very tightly integrated, software defined, as you say, and having those fluid pools of resources where I can basically say, I need 30 apps tomorrow running out in the field because of this promotion, or I just did an M&A and I need to tie in their systems to my system very quickly. How do I do that? We think composable is the next step above and beyond software defined.
It sounds great, and I will say, some of the advancements that have been made with OneView, the new management software for 3PAR, and now I think it can also tie into some of the networking switches from HP and some other third parties. Being able to just use PowerShell, because that's one of my favorite tools, to write to these RESTful APIs and get things done is just fantastic. And the more that you can templatize and automate the processes, the happier I am. Because ultimately, I'd rather be doing something else than typing out lines of, or manually configuring anything.
Absolutely, and and that seems to be the goal. When you talk to CIOs or chief technology officers today, they basically said, I want to manage my data. I want my data to be usable data that can be a competitive edge. And the other, and CIOs want to manage URLs and their web services more than hardware. So, we're, again, that software defined as well as the hardware being integrated into a very unique and eliminating one of the key factors. 50% of downtime today is really pointed to one thing, and I hate to say who that is, but it's us, human beings. So, that happens because of human error and mistakes. Somebody pulls the wrong plug, somebody presses the wrong keystroke, and things just don't always work as well. So one of the things that you talked about, Ned, and brought up with OneView, was to do those studies with customers as well as channel partners on what the average human being does in IT tasking today and informational services, and try to put that into a best practice. So you have those templates, you have those fluid pools of resources when you want to do it, and everything is built the same way every single time. Taking those human tasks, from what Gartner says today, about 20% every year of human orchestration that occurs is now being built into infrastructure. So just think of it: 20% of that average guy that's out there doing whatever he does every day, from a human, statistic, putting a plug in, turning the lights on, pulling a tape cartridge out, backing up his storage, is now going to just be all automated. So at one point in time, it'll be one guy running a data center that maybe 20 people did at one time.
If you're a sysadmin, and you said, change is the only constant in our industry, what are the skills that, Joe sysadmin should be bulking up on right now if he wants to keep his job?
Well, it's an interesting thing, because I do believe in this world that there's 20 IT jobs for every college IT major grad that comes out of school. So I don't believe that opportunities will be less, but I do think that CIO, that chief technology officer, that chief digital officer, or security officer will reallocate those resources to be specialists for specific needs that need to occur. But again, some of those menial manual tasks that weren't done, today, I can plug and play a hyperconverged solution in and have it producing, production VMs within 15 minutes with one guy, and that's 5 clicks. So he's an IT generalist. He's the ditto guy from school. He's the guy that does, all he needs to do is follow 5 of the instructions and he's up and running. From a sysadmin perspective, my belief is that you're going to see them specialize in areas of data mining, security, digitizing their enterprise, because everybody's going to be digital at some time in space. So those guys won't lose jobs. They'll grow in their jobs, and they'll just become more specialty under the hood type of human beings.
Okay. But yeah, they should definitely be on the lookout for the new technologies and embracing them, and not saying, hey, I really like my VT100 green screen console and that's all I'm ever going to use.
Absolutely. If they're still stuck at that time, then maybe there's no hope. But I do believe today most of these guys know where we're going. We know that you see the security issues that we have today. That's a major portion of every company's, to address those things. Who's attacking me? How am I attacked? How do I prevent those attacks? Ransomware, and that has changed IT strategy in a number of ways. Mm-hmm. So, and then again, I go just to the basics of data. I just see us collecting and collecting and collecting, and yet it's still unusable. It's unstructured. It's still raw. How do we mine that data to where it is usable? And companies that are figuring out those ways to make it into functional, usable data for a competitive edge are the ones that are winning. If you look at the top 20 companies today and on Wall Street, and you look at the top 20 companies only 15 years ago, you'll find that most of the 20 companies out there today have a very strong IT focus, and that is the competitive edge, versus the 20 that weren't there or are not there anymore 20 years ago.
Right. So IT is not something you just do. It has to be one of your core competencies.
Absolutely.
Now if you want to be competitive.
Absolutely. It's the digitalization of the enterprise, and if it's not part of why it makes me a better company, then somebody's living certainly in the past.
Yeah. You mentioned security, and with the Internet of Things and all this data that's coming out, and then ransomware, and there's I think security is becoming a much bigger concern. Is there anything, any big trends you see to address the security issues that are out there today?
Well, it's very interesting. Since Meg Whitman's been here, one of the things that Meg has done a great job is reinvesting into HP Labs, as well as M&A in growth areas. And we all know security is a growth area. So, with the acquisition of Aruba and some of the software tools that Aruba has, from Fortify to a lot of other tools that we're using in the security space, we've really ramped. We actually have a cybersecurity data center and lab in Palo Alto now that we actually have CISOs come in and spend a day with our CISOs about how to prevent attacks, how to understand attacks. And I'll give you just sort of a quick story. One of our CISOs that I know pretty well was the former Washington Post CISO, and he told me the story that one night the Federal Bureau of Investigation called him and said, "Hey, you have a breach." And 3 a.m. in the morning, he got his team together. He had an emergency team. It took him 2 weeks, and he thought he found a breach, and called the FBI agent up and said, "We fixed it." And the FBI agent basically said, "No, you haven't." So, team went back to work. They fixed the one breach that the FBI was not really aware of. Came back 2 or 3 weeks later, said, "Oh, we found a second breach," and the FBI guy as well said, "No, you didn't." So for the third time, he finally fixed it. It was a foreign nation, and the FBI really couldn't help him because it was an ongoing legal case that was, ongoing. But people think that they're not prone, or they're in an industry that maybe not be vulnerable. and how wrong that is. I mean, everybody, we have, in our center today, we could show you basically where the attacks come from, where they go, how they're rerouted, what they look like, how they're hidden. And so from our perspective, security is going to be a major play, not only in the software side, but as far as taking some of that software and making it technology integrated into in a hardware fashion, where you have some hardware defenses built in to protect yourself from ongoing attacks as well.
Yeah. I've heard the Internet of Things called the Internet of Insecure Things.
Yep. Wow.
And I guess that just happens when there's rapid growth and rapid development happening. Security is not the first thing they're thinking of. And so now they have to go back and say, oh, wow, so I left all this stuff open just to get it to work, and now I need to clamp it down. How do I do that?
Absolutely. I mean, and again, so I still think security is not at the head of the priorities for most companies today. That is changing, obviously. I just saw I think the World Bank, $88 million offloaded into Eastern European accounts from originally an email. So, there's a number of things that we need to do. We have a really good security practice now. We continue to build in the security space, and the security tools are out there. And if you just go under HPE/go/security, you'll see all the offerings you have. But what I would tell you, as you guys know, being one of our premier partners, is just reach out to us. We'll bring the right people in to help you with security studies.
All right, thank you. A pure public cloud is probably not a good fit for most businesses.
Yep.
It's really some sort of hybrid of the two. Some things on-prem, some things up in the cloud. I mean, very small businesses going all public cloud might make sense.
Yep.
But once you go to a certain size, bringing some of that back in-house makes sense. And there was that very interesting story of Dropbox, who for a long time were all in AWS, everything. That's where they got their roots. They took advantage of S3 storage when it first came out and built a whole platform on it. And now they have taken all of that and brought all of it in-house in their own data centers and basically off of the public cloud entirely.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure they didn't do that on a whim.
No, I think that was cost related.
Oh, absolutely. And maybe to a certain degree security related, but definitely, they had to see some sort of major cost savings. Apple's doing the same thing right now.
Yeah.
So, and I think, there's definitely a few other companies that have done that sort of, hey, we went all in on this public cloud. Ooh, maybe we're not saving as much money as we thought. Let's try going hybrid, and we have that bursting capability if we ever need it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think it's a very interesting perspective. Yet, it's such a new thing, and the rush is there. We're all going to do it. And then all of a sudden, first of all, if you're in pharmaceutical or you're in financial, you have regulatory rules around what you do and what could stay on and what you could stay off. And I still think the SLAs in public cloud are still formulating, because nobody's figured everything out yet, even though I think AWS and Google and Microsoft have done a very good job. The first time, there's a major breach in security, what is that going to do? How does that affect you? Do you have your data replicated on site? Can I get access to it? Is it completely gone? And I know these are things that they've addressed in a lot of different ways, but I still think the maturation of public cloud becomes much more leaning towards hybrid as we go on.
Right. There was that most recent outage from Salesforce.com, and they were down for, 12 hours?
12 hours.
12 hours, and they lost about 4 hours of data, I think.
Yep.
It keeps changing a little bit, but essentially they did lose a chunk of data, and they had all these safeguards in place and fail-safes, and
one of the things I think you guys have done well here at Anexinet is you've partnered with a company called Cloud Genera. And so Cloud Genera basically gives you an in-depth report on your overall cost of what's effectively able to go to public, which should stay in-house. And it actually is so cool because it looks at your industry, it manages all your regulatory rules and procedures. So it actually said, okay, I'm in healthcare. And then when you run the report, it says these are the things that you must stay in-house, or I'm in financial, or I'm in energy. But they do a very extensive, almost 50-page report on public-private hybrid that I find they do a better job of the homework that most companies ever really put put forth when they think about going to public. So it's something that your customers certainly should engage with you guys and have do a Cloud Genera initiative at their site.
Yeah, I mean, developing a cloud strategy is key for all businesses right now. And it's really just part of a bigger IT strategy. Like I said, you need to have that competitive edge for IT, and you need a strategy behind that. It's not just blindly going, oh, public cloud sounds awesome, or OpenStack sounds awesome, or whatever. It's let's develop where do we actually want to be? What strategic initiatives are we trying to accomplish with this?
And what effective results to our company occur because we're doing that strategy? Absolutely. So it is very interesting. I see more and more people being a little bit more cautious on developing. Now we have the world of CXOs, CDOs, CISOs, you name it, and obviously you're going to have the chief cloud department as well. So. But we're starting to see, shadow cloud happening, rogue cloud happening. People that have access to AWS where, they didn't know this department was running out there, and they probably shouldn't be. So again, I think there's still, some of the rules and procedures have to be reined in, and governance has to be provided.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we are coming up on time. Last question, my favorite question to ask. Don't think about this too hard. Just first thing that pops in your mind, your favorite 80s movie.
Well, I'd have to probably say Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump. Okay.
Yeah, Forrest Gump. I love Forrest Gump only for the fact that Tom Hanks showed you what the goodness in human beings are.
Well, that is a delightful note to go out on. Scott Richards, the server dude at HPE, thank you so much for joining us.
Ned, it's been a pleasure, and I'd love to come back and do this again with you at some time.
All right, sounds great.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Special thanks go out to our guest, Scott Richards, the server dude, for taking the time to talk with us and share his thoughts on the future of infrastructure and servers. Thanks to Catherine and Patty for helping pull this together as always. Thanks to Lee Rosevere and Professor Kliq for providing the music for Anexipod. Thanks to Anexinet for helping me produce the podcast. If you're looking for a company to help you with your digital, strategy, or technology needs, then I would recommend reaching out to Anexinet to see how they can help. Anexipod is produced under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license, which means you can share it, but don't sell or change it. And finally, thank you to you for tuning in and listening. Without you, I would just be a lunatic talking in a room to myself. If you'd like to comment on the podcast or contact me in some other way, my Twitter handle is Ned1313, or you can use the hashtag Anexipod. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, IT moves pretty fast. If you don't stop to look around once in a while, you could miss it.